Hey guys, 2Track here, and welcome back to another episode of the Trains of Western Australia, and this time it's no April Fool's joke. In this episode we'll be taking a gander at the GT26C, which was one of Western Australia's greatest workhorses. Now while it looks and sounds slightly similar to the American ST40 series, its 50 years of service around Western Australia and beyond more than contends with its American counterpart. It begins at a time when the WAGR wasn't seeing the end, but rather when it was very much alive and well and ruled over the steel rails of Western Australia with an iron fist. However, its fleet of engines needed a change. Considering the fact that WAGR was still phasing out its fleet of steam engines during this time, they stuck to mostly modern diesel power. But one such locomotive that didn't do well in the field was the X-Class, who was fought up of by a man named Charles Clark. Clark was heavily influenced by the British and had a strong bias towards British engines that were actually untested and weren't even deemed reliable yet, despite ordering them anyways. The X-Class carried the HST V8 engine, which were considered by engineers to be rubbish because of their faults and constant oil slicks that they left behind. Because of these problems at hand, Clark was sacked from the WAGR only to be replaced by William Britta in 1959. When Britta was appointed to the WAGR, he was the total opposite of Clark. Britta had American influence and saw the potential in EMD's locomotives in the USA with the F7 series, and later its expansion into the Australian market with the GM class, which was very similar to the F7 in internals and looks. This was something Britta was very fond of and would adopt these ideals in his later years when he took on the role of WAGR's chief mechanical engineer. Because of his strong American influence, it was in 1967 that Britta would come up with a design that was so well achieved it lasted for 50 years straight. The locomotive was named the L-Class, but the design in particular is the GT26C. GT26C being the abbreviation for General Turbocharged Engine 16645 Cocoa Bogies. On paper, the locomotive looks like the standard EMD export, but internally it was a mechanical force to be reckoned with. This was especially the case when Britta insisted that 3,000 horsepower locomotives were the future, and fitted the GT26C with a 3,300 horsepower 16645 V3 variant instead of the 2,000 horsepower engine option. It was also fitted with a 13,350 litre fuel tank, an EMD AR10 alternator, and EMD's D77 traction motors. They could also reach a top speed of 137 km per hour or 85 miles per hour, had a length of around 20 metres or 66 feet, and had an axle load of 22.5 tonnes with a locomotive itself weighing in at 137 tonnes. They were also built with dual control stands, allowing the engine to safely run long hood forward or short hood forward with ease. And finally, the L-Class rode on 4-foot 8.5-inch standard gauge track. The overall decision that Britta made would actually benefit the WAGR when it would enter service. 3 days after the L-Class was built, it was given a special handover ceremony, with L251 being the very first L-Class to operate on Western Australian rails. And then what followed afterwards was a spectacular 50-year history. It was in their first years of service when they were really put to the test. In the years of 1969 to 1973, the first few were sent to run the longest and heaviest iron ore trains of its time from the town of Koolyanobbing, which is where the iron ore was sourced from, to the industrial town of Kwinana. These trains usually pulled around 105 iron ore wagons with 2 or even 3 locomotives up the front, but this would later be outdone by the railways up in the Pilbara. Later in 1972, 2 similar locomotives were built, but these were not intended for the WAGR. Instead, they were sent to Queensland for a company called Comalco, now part of today's Rio Tinto. Comalco placed the 2 locomotives in service as R1001 and R1002. These would later become L277 and LW276, which would later be sent back to WA, while L277 stayed in the eastern states. As opposed to the standard L-Class, this was 11 tonnes heavier than the original model and had no dynamics fitted, although this was solely a cutting cost measure because they had no steam gradients. Later in 1973, Western Mining Corporation, now part of today's BHP Billiton, decided to fund the order for 2 L-classes for operations north of Perth in the town of Leonora. The trains would haul nickel concentrate minerals to the town of Hampton and back to Leonora. The paint job was different from the previously applied blue and yellow and Admiralty grey found on most WAGR locomotives. They also helped pull the legendary transcontinental Indian Pacific from Kalgoorlie to its final destination, Perth. However, it was quickly discovered the locomotives were defective, causing it to twist and shake up to speeds exceeding 90 km per hour or 55 miles per hour. This was further proven when it was running Longwood Ford and was subsequently kept away from hauling the Indian Pacific, thus giving the role to the English electric-built K-Class. In 1975, the L-Classes suddenly changed their livery into International Orange for a newly reorganised business named Westrail, but the paint scheme was quickly found to be an eyesore and were repainted a year later into their well-known blue and orange livery, with L256 being the first to do so. The rest of the classes would be painted with a white border stripe above the blue. Skip to 1983 and the newly formed V-Line had a problem. The company had a power shortage and couldn't seem to get any other locomotives from anywhere else, and this meant contacting other railways in other states to lease their power until new units arrived. One of these said railways was Westrail. Westrail happily complied and gave 3 L-Classes to assist the new railway and deal with its power crisis. The Ls, however, had to conform with Victorian standards, and this was done by adding an RBB3 chime and Victorian radios. The L-Class did so well at its job that V-Line actually wanted to purchase the locomotives outright, but Westrail gave a stern no, causing V-Line to purchase the G-Class. The L-Classes were shortly sent back home afterwards. Funnily enough, the Victorians would later come up with their own GT26C, named the C-Class. In 1997, Westrail introduced the 4,000 horsepower strong Q-Classes, which spelled the end for the reign of the L-Class, and 3 years later, Westrail was sold. Some L-Classes were handed over to the eastern states, while others were given to the Australian Western Railroad, which then became ARG. In 2002, 4 L-Classes were refurbished by ARG for service in Darwin and were given the name LZ and LQ, denoting the ZTR Nexus 2 wheel subsystems or Qtron QES traction control systems. This would later be applied to all L-Classes, including the numeric classification of 3100. The reign of the mighty L-Classes would finally come to an end when all 13 that remained in Western Australia were placed in storage. The final 4 L-Classes were placed in storage and were deactivated on the 12th of the 1st, 2018. Their future shall forever remain unknown.
Right, so that was the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I certainly had fun making it, despite how long it took to make it. But I think it was certainly worth the wait. Huge thanks again to WestOzman98 for helping with historical sources and information, since there is a decent lack of sources on the internet. Again, I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. 2Track out.